This is the Hope Not Note podcast,
where we answer your questions and share inspirational stories to fill your soul with hope.
Our mission is to empower hope to those who have been plagued by nope.
I'm Dr. Dylan Caswell.
And I'm Brandy.
And we're here to bring you out of the nope and into hope.
Welcome back to the next episode of the Hope Not Note podcast. We are so excited that you are here and thrilled that you're listening. I am so pumped to share a story because I think that it's so important to rejoice with friends. And this past week, I had the opportunity to rejoice with one of my good friends. About a year ago, she had ankle surgery. And prior to that, she was kind of athletic, but also had a lot of injuries because of just like certain like traumatic situations that happened in her life. And she did have a little bit of like a, separate from the traumatic situations, had a little bit of a bodybuilding background. But she kept having this ankle injury and all this stuff. So she had this surgery about a year ago. And the reason why I'm rejoicing with this friend this week is because she reminded us of her surgery. And I was completely blown away because she is an incredible athlete currently. She's doing her first ever CrossFit competition. She's working out twice a day, running, lifting, like all these things. I had completely forgot that she had this surgery. And so I'm just so excited to share that hope story, you know, because my friend truly, like, what an example of hope that she is, that she had this surgery and she had this phenomenal bounce back like very quickly and entered into from bodybuilding to CrossFit, which is, you know, more work on the ankle. And I don't know, I'm so excited to share that story because I think a lot of people go through challenges and need their friends to rejoice with them. And I'm so thankful that I was able to rejoice with my friend this past week.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow. It's amazing when you're going through an injury, that goal of doing something like CrossFit or bodybuilding or running or even walking again seems so far away. Mm-hmm. And then you get there and you look back and you're just, whoa, that was a year ago. Like, I can't even believe that was a year ago.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how the body will heal itself given the right framework and guidance and direction and working on that component of not being afraid. Mm-hmm. To get back into it. So that is amazing.
Yeah.
My hope story, I learned that the best value is the unexpected value.
Tell me more.
I think the past couple weeks had the awesome opportunity to work with some more clients and also to do an interview on Father Paul's podcast, His Holy Mess, which we'll put on our website and we'll be getting that out there. And it was awesome because like my background is my doctorate in physical therapy. So people tend to kind of box that in that, oh, physical therapy. So exercise, manual therapy, some soft tissue work, using machines, ultrasound, electrical stimulation. And that's part of the physical therapy practice, but that's not the part that I participate in. I believe that we have much stronger things that we can do for people that will go much further for them long term. And I love like speaking with Father Paul on his podcast. It was a hilarious episode. Like he is doing incredible things. Like make sure you listen to his podcast. But he goes, I listened to your book and it wasn't what I was expecting. I was expecting exercises. I was expecting it to be this thing. I've been to physical therapy for many years and I thought I knew what it was. And I read your book and I listened to it and now I want to go get your physical copy because I want to highlight it because I learned so much in it. And, you know, in the interview, he talks about, you know, I'm not a lifelong athlete, but I still got things out of it. And I got to redirect them. And they're like, no, man, you are a lifelong athlete. Like you are disciplined, you are sacrificing, you are serving, you are a lifelong athlete. So it was really cool to hear that from a person that we really look up to of it wasn't what I was expecting, and that there was unexpected value and that he got out of it. A couple of clients that I've worked with recently, they said a similar thing. They got done with the appointment. They were very excited. They said, I think I knew that I needed that, but I didn't think it was going to come from you. Right? Because people think of me as like CrossFit athlete and PT, and that the barbell fixes everything. And I'm not saying the barbell doesn't fix some things, like love the barbell, but there's much more that we can do that is in the framework of hope, not nope. So those things really lifted me up and got me excited for the work of that unexpected value that people aren't considering when they get a book that was written by a recovering physical therapist. So those are my hope stories.
Oh, I love those hope stories. I think it's so important too. I think people go into most things with a certain set of expectations. And sometimes when expectations aren't met, it can be a catastrophe for that person. But instead, it actually became a huge value in these situations because sure, their expectations weren't met, but what ended up happening was 1,000 times better for them than what their expectations were to begin with.
Right. Yeah, and when your expectations don't match reality, that's where disappointment occurs. So when people say it wasn't what I was expecting, I get a little nervous.
Right.
Like, oh, uh-oh, this can go one of two ways. You're either incredibly disappointed or you're blown out of the water. And it happened to be that these two cases were more towards the blown out of the water versus the disappointed one, which is good.
Yeah, very good. Thank you for sharing your home stories. So we're going to dive into our questions this week. Our first question is from a listener named Lena, and she asks, what is your view on joint replacements? What is your criteria for recommending someone to get a joint replacement?
Lena, great question. At our last talk, we actually talked about this idea of bone on bone and that it doesn't exist, which the book goes into, and I'll share a little bit of it here to not leave people on a cliffhanger. But that was probably one of the main questions we got afterwards, where people, I already got my joint replaced, so what do I do with that? Well, once it's replaced, and there's no going back, so we have to move forward. But when should I do a joint replacement? Should I do a joint replacement? What joint should I be replacing? There's a lot of good research on knee replacements, a lot of good research on hip replacements. There's some decent research on shoulder replacements. And then there's other joints that have attempted to be replaced throughout the history of joint replacements that did not go well and are not going well. And those are the ones related to the spine. So if anyone is considering a joint replacement, vertebral replacement, the evidence isn't there, the research isn't there, I'd recommend getting other opinions if that's what you're being told. So this idea of being bone on bone, it's one of these things that's been passed down from generation to generation to generation to generation. Everyone believes it. You have arthritis, it means that you're bone on bone. It means that, for example, in the knee, the femur's rubbing on the tibia and that they're rubbing each other and there's no joint space and it's going to continue to degenerate. They're going to rub harder and harder. You're going to be in severe pain. You need this joint replacement. The reality is there's no science showing that actually exists. On the contrary, there is science showing that doesn't happen. And this comes from Terry Ahmed et al. It was in the 80s. They're in Japan. And they took a cadaver and they took the femur and the tibia, hooked it up to a machine, and they tried to press the femur, so the thigh bone, into the tibia, the shin bone. They used 2 times the body weight trying to force these things together. They weren't able to get them to touch. And this is in a cadaver. We now go into the living system that still has fluids throughout it. And in the knee joint, for example, we have synovial fluid and other fluids that go in there. This fluid in this phase of water, they have alike charges. So basic science, what happens when alike charges are across from each other? They're going to repel, right? If they're different charges, positive, negative, or plus, minus, they're going to attract each other. So the same ones, they're going to repel. And that's what we see in the synovial joint is that we have alike charges that are repelling the joint surfaces apart. So mind you that in the cadaver, that fluid's not there anymore. And these surfaces still weren't able to touch. Right. So now we go into the living system that has fluid in that knee, the synovial fluid that has the alike charge or has the alike charges that are repelling each other. And now it becomes even less likely that these surfaces can touch against each other. So we need to change our concept of what arthritis is. It's not a bone-on-bone condition, because bone-on-bone does not exist up to this date. Like, no one has researched and shown that it does exist. What tends to happen is people will get an x-ray, and then from the x-ray, it looks like there's no joint space, and they'll say, oh, look at this, this is wearing away. And we see that, a trusted figure is telling us that, so then we start to believe that, oh, we're bone on bone. Now, what happens when someone's told they're bone on bone? They get afraid. I don't want to move, because if I move, I'm going to further degenerate this, and I am going to need a joint replacement. So a lot of people get fearful and stop moving, and the common narrative is, you're going to need a joint replacement. You'll know when. Just call me when you're ready. So now the person's anticipating that I'm going to need this thing. I just need to keep my mind on the pain. And as it keeps getting worse, because I'm thinking about it all the time, now I'll go get that joint replacement. So I think people are getting primed into believing that they need this thing and that there's no other solution. And that is not the case. I said earlier that we need to reframe how we think about arthritis. And I will say that cartilage can deteriorate. And that's what we tend to see in arthritis, is that the cartilage that's covering the ends of the bones, that starts to deteriorate. The reason being is because of inflammation that is in that area. So then what's bringing on inflammation? Because inflammation is not a bad thing. We need inflammation to heal. It's the first step of the healing process. But when we have too much inflammation that's not being dealt with, now that area is deteriorating and it's not being built back up. So we need a good balance of that. So we look at, what is your internal load? Something that we talk on a lot. How are you sleeping? Mm-hmm. One lady I was chatting with, so sleeping will help my knee. How much do you sleep a night right now? Well, about 4 hours. I think it's a really good start to start getting more sleep and seeing how it changes. Because what happens when we sleep? Your body repairs itself. Mm-hmm. If you're not sleeping, you're not giving your body that time to be able to repair itself. So sleep. What's your nutrition like? Are you putting in a bunch of junk food over and over and over and over again, have all these free radicals floating around, no antioxidants to come and pick up all the waste, that now the cartilage is getting the message, inflammation, keep deteriorating. And what happens when a person stops moving? More inflammation is coming on, because they're not giving themselves the recovery, the setup for recovery that is needed once you are active and moving around. So it's interesting, because there is studies showing that in postmenopausal women and in other populations, but this is the study group that we'll use, in postmenopausal women that were told that they have some form of arthritis, mild to moderate, they started a low impact physical activity program. So low level plyometrics, so jumping up and down, walking, just anything impact into the leg. What they found was that their patellofemoral cartilage actually regenerated. No stem cells, no additives, no fancy pill or supplement, no injections, just impact, and regenerated their cartilage.
Wow.
Very powerful what our bodies can do when we give them the chance. Mm-hmm. But when we're told that we're bone on bone, come to me when your pain's too much, we don't give people that chance to even have that opportunity to even think of what would life look like without a joint replacement. With that being said, joint replacements, especially at the hip and at the knee, they can be very successful for people in limiting their pain, improving function somewhat, but getting back to the level that they may have wanted to get to becomes a lot more difficult when you have this joint, because surgeons, engineers, they're doing the best they can to make this as lined up as naturally as they can to your anatomy. It's never going to be perfect, right? It's always going to be millimeter off or 0.1 millimeters off. It's never going to be as perfect as it was the way that it was created. So I always tell people that make sure that you know going into this, it's not going to be as perfect as your natural anatomy, but also going into this, if you are going to have a knee replacement, and I guess we should talk on, well, when is that joint replacement? And I'm talking about the knee, it could be the hip or the shoulder. It's when you have given yourself a chance, a fair chance, a year to 2 years of strengthening, of using impact exercise, of using some cognitive reframing, using neuroplasticity to change what your brain is thinking about the knee. If you've done those things and it's still present and it's inhibiting you from doing what you want to do, now it's a good time to look at that surgery, right? But people aren't even given that chance anymore. They're just told, oh, look at this x-ray. Yeah, it's deteriorating. You're bone on bone coming to get that surgery. But let's give people a chance. Let's give them 1 to 2 years to really work at it. And then here's the thing. People go, well, I don't want to wait 1 to 2 years. I'm wasting time. No, you just spent 1 to 2 years getting stronger, meaning that you're going to recover much faster than if you weren't doing that in the beginning. So it's really not wasted time or effort. It's a good thing to be doing. But the other thing I tell people is that before you go in to have a joint replacement, I want you to sit and I want you to reflect if you can accept this as your knee. Because it's a foreign object that's going into the body. And so many people after a replacement will not say my knee. They'll say my replaced knee, my joint replaced knee. You are dissociating that body part away from yourself. Neurologically, now your brain is saying, this knee is not actually me. This knee is something that was put into me, but it's not my knee. So if you are going to have a joint replacement, are you able to accept and welcome this replacement part as one of your own now? Because if not, and this is from working with people that have chronic pain after they have the knee replaced, I want to decrease my pain, so I had this knee replacement. Why do I still have this discomfort? This thing was supposed to fix it. You haven't accepted that this is now your body part. Your thought is still that this is something else. So the brain when the brain perceives a foreign object in the body, what does it do? It's fight time, baby. We're sending out these cells. We're going to attack this thing. We're going to try to get it out of there. We need to fully accept it. And if that criteria is met, that you can do that, you're willing to put in the work afterwards to rehab, get your motion back, get your strength back. You've given yourself a fair opportunity, 1 year, 2 years of going at it, and it's didn't work for you. Good, then there's a joint replacement. But we've worked with many people that were told you have to have this joint replaced, and guess what? 2, 3, 5, 6, 7 years later, they're running. They're out here running without a replacement. I won't say the best their knees ever felt, because that was probably when they were like 10, 11, or 12, but they're feeling really good. They are feeling incredibly good, and they're saying, hey, I don't need that follow-up for that knee replacement. Can you stop calling me about the knee replacement surgery? Stop sending me flyers saying that I need a knee replacement surgery, because I don't. I've done these other things. It was successful. I don't want that anymore. But people are so bombarded with this info, and sorry to go on a tangent here, but oh man, I had a younger patient that was telling me that she was getting a call from a surgical office saying, you need a preventative knee replacement surgery. A preventative knee replacement surgery? A knee replacement surgery is never preventative. It's the last option. Everything else has been exhausted. Now we can go to the knee replacement, not preventative. And she was younger. She was younger in getting this call. Like, luckily she's like very health literate, very, very smart and sassy. And was like, no, don't call me with that. Like, get that corn out of my face and let's move on. But it's really, it's kind of heartbreaking when you hear that. And again, I don't want to paint this picture that like every orthopedic surgeon that's doing knee replacements is sitting there with like a suitcase full of money and let's call these people and do that. There are really great surgeons that are doing knee replacements. And how do you know they're really great? Because they're not offering it as the first line solution. You have some knee discomfort? All right, we don't need to do imaging. You should go to physical therapy. Do that. We'll follow up and we'll see where we're at. All right, how's it going? Going well? Okay, cool. Keep going. Keep going. Get stronger, get stronger. Back pocket, we have this thing, but I'm not even going to offer it until we've done the conservative management first. And we have a handful of those that we know and that we work with, and they're awesome. And if you're questioning like, oh man, I want that, like go get second opinions, third opinions, fourth opinions.
For sure. Well, I think that our desire at Hope Not Nope and just in general is for people to become the best versions of themselves. But I think part of becoming the best version of yourself is to look at the way that we were initially designed and honor and like reverence that. And so before you hop into, any surgery, especially joint replacement, but really just anything, ask yourself, am I honoring and reverencing the original design that I've had? And am I giving it a chance to be the best that it possibly can?
Yeah, and when we look at hope, right? Hope it's defined by self-agency, goals, and a framework. So ask yourself, what framework am I using?
Mm-hmm.
Am I using this thing that's been passed down from generation to generation to generation that does not have any scientific fundamental base to it?
Mm-hmm.
Or am I using what the modern science is showing us?
Right. Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lena, for that great question. I hope that some of our listeners are able to take that in for themselves, but also you know, maybe you have a parent or a grandparent or someone in your life that is questioning, oh, should I have a joint replacement, that you can share this with, because it might give them a new perspective that might help them before they go get that replacement before they really need to.
Right.
So thank you, Lena, for that question. Our next question is from a listener named Randy, and he asks, how do you find meaningful activity if you haven't pursued it in a long time?
Randy, phenomenal question. And it's difficult to answer because meaningful activity is always individualized.
Mm-hmm.
It's dependent on your goals. It's dependent on what fires you up. It's dependent on the environment, because if you're in a shootout, your meaningful activity is staying alive.
Mm-hmm.
So in those situations, your body and soul is going to change what meaningful activity means, right? For some people, it might be painting. Some people might be walking. Some people might be catching up with a friend. Some people might be playing some pickleball. Some
Mm-hmm.
people might be pick up basketball. It might be watching some old highlight films, might be going through some old yearbooks, reminiscing, celebrating someone who's not physically with us anymore. So that meaningful activity it's always individualized to you in the season that you're in and what your body is asking you for,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you haven't experienced it in a long time and you're not sure where to start, my hypothesis would be that your mind is too cluttered right now, that your body and your soul is asking you for this thing, but you have way too much going on between the ears to be able to listen to that. So the first step is that you have to declutter the brain. How do you do that? Again, it's individualized to everyone. You don't have to sit on the floor, crisscross applesauce, making circles and going, like some people that works for. Other people, it's throwing on some classic rock and jamming out. Other people might be going to a comedy show. Some people might be going to a hockey game. But it's doing that thing that brings you joy, that allows you to not be thinking about what you need to do next, or what's on the plate for tomorrow or the next week or the month or the quarter or the year. It's that time where you're just still. And still doesn't mean that you're not moving, because for some people it could be a walk, right? And go on a walk, I mean, have your phone for safety in case something's needed, but turn off your notifications. Just go for a long walk and just let yourself be in those moments. Once your brain becomes decluttered a bit more, I think it becomes more clear as to what is that meaningful activity that I am longing for. Because the amazing thing about our neural system and our body and our soul and our mind and this interconnectedness of all of that is that it knows. It knows what it wants, it knows what it needs, and it's going to request it if you're willing to listen to it. And it will keep requesting it and keep requesting it. We just need to have our ears open. And to do that, the first step is just decluttering. Just have those moments, those quick moments to declutter. Don't think, like, don't sit there and go, what's the meaningful activity? Like, literally just do an activity that you've been wanting to do, and then just be in there. And as a thought pops up, listen to it. If it's something like, I used to use this imagery a lot because I had a very cluttered brain when I first got out of school and was working clinically, was working with 3 different teams, was working as an adjunct professor. had a lot going on, a lot of clutter in my brain. I didn't get this note done. I didn't email this person back. I got to call this athlete back and their parent and their physician, and super cluttered. And I was like, dang, I need to declutter this a little bit. And I was like, well, I'm just going to close my eyes and breathe. And I closed my eyes and breathed, and all of the thoughts were still there. Every thought was there, and almost got even worse because now I didn't have distractions. And I almost realized like how cluttered my brain actually was. So for me, what I did for myself that worked was I envisioned all of these thoughts on sticky notes, and they're floating around my brain. What I would visualize is the sticky note being crumbled up, and I envisioned a hand just batting it away. And it was saying, not that this thought is not important, we're not throwing it away, but we're putting it to the side. We're putting it to the side. It will come up later when you need it. Like, we'll uncrumble it so that you can read it, but right now, crumble, slapping it away. So I had to visualize this with every thought that was coming up. Did you do the dishes? Crumble that up, swat it aside. Did you get groceries? Crumble that up, swat it aside. It's 5 minutes in a day that we can go without thinking about all the things that we need to do. But I had to practice that for a good 2 to 3 months before I could get to a place where I could close my eyes, take a deep breath, and just go, I'm uncluttered. I'm here to listen to what my body and soul is telling me. So that worked for me. May not work for you. Again, it's individualized, but it's finding that thing that allows you to declutter and not play. One of our good friends that we play basketball with, he said it so beautifully. Basketball is my sandbox. When I'm between these lines on the court, I'm not thinking about anything. I'm just playing and I'm just enjoying myself. Like, that is stillness. And that's what you need to find before you start searching to get back to that meaningful activity.
Right. I think it's just giving yourself space.
Yeah.
Right? Like, in my heart, I was like, oh, you have to give yourself space to dream again. But maybe you can't dream again yet because you're so cluttered. But giving yourself just space to be and to receive, like you said, listen, receive, like, that's going to go a lot farther. And we live in such a busy world with a lot of chaos. There's politics, there's war, there's fighting, there's just drama, and then there's, Hollywood living, and then there's social media stereotypes and expectations, and you name it. The world is out there and it's crazy. And there's a lot of beauty in the world too, don't get me wrong. But it's so important to just give yourself a little bit of space to breathe and to receive.
Yeah. 100%. And you're so good at taking my 8 to 10 minute answer and summarizing it into like 30 to 45 seconds.
Well, I guess that's the gift of being on my side of the podcast. Randy, great question. I appreciate it. Our third question is from a listener named Kristen, and she asks, what is your favorite chapter takeaway from your book?
Kristen, phenomenal question. I feel like we don't have kids yet or in the near future, but I feel like it's asking like, which kid is your favorite? And parents say, oh, I don't have a favorite kid. I think they do. I think they do. I was like, our nephew signed the guest book, and he's like, I know I'm your favorite nephew. You don't have to tell the other ones, but I know that I'm your favorite.
Yeah, at our wedding, that was the way you signed the guest book.
So I will say I love all the chapter takeaways. I love that each person I've talked to experiences them differently, and that people go to different chapters at different times for whatever they're facing that day. Like, I've had a few people that, like, I really needed that perspective chapter, so I just went right to it. I really needed a gratitude chapter, so I just went to it. I really needed that self-doubt one, so I just went right to it. And that makes me so happy that people have found that like, yes, I read the whole book, but I know where to go to in these moments, because that's the goal. Here's the framework. Use it for you. Use it for you to become who you were intended to be. One of my favorite takeaways is the chapter Reflection on Labels, and reflecting on what labels have been placed on you. Which ones do you want to keep? Which ones do you want to throw away? because they don't serve you anymore. And the reason I really like that one is because you're bringing your brain through the past into the present and thinking about the future, like all in this one practice. And it happens in like kind of the middle part of the book so that people have time to practice the other reflections and kind of work up to that. It's no different than a weight training program. Let's start with air squats. Let's add in goblet squats. Let's add in a barbell squat. Then let's add in Olympic lifting. So the book, the practices are meant to kind of be progressive in that way. And I think that middle point with labels really gets you reflecting on, where do these labels come from and why did I accept them? Mm-hmm. Why did I think that that's the way I need to live my life? Right. Why am I letting this label from when I was 8 years old, from this arrogant person, dictate how I'm living my life when I'm 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 or 70 or 80 or 90? Yeah. I love it because it's incredible when people have that realization. Like, wow, I'm trying to impress this person that gave me this label that I haven't talked to in 40 years. Why am I doing that? What is it that I want to do? Who is it that I want to become? Like, what was that dream that I had? What was that identity that I once had that I let go because of the labels that were put on me? And it's so empowering to reflect on those labels and go, that's not me. You were wrong. You were wrong. You were wrong. They served me because maybe they fired you up. Maybe they lit a fire underneath in football, the tush push, but maybe they lit a fire underneath your butt that made you run that extra mile, that made you work a little bit harder. So these labels, they serve at certain parts in your life. But then when you get the self-agency to realize that you don't need that label anymore, oh, it's so powerful. Yeah. And then it sets it up for the second half of the book when we start reflecting into self-doubt and gratitude and forgiveness and some of those more complex thinking. So I think that one, I'd have to go with that one. What about you? Did you have one?
Well, you just said mine. Well, no, I think just to comment on labels before I share my favorite one. I remember, I think when we were working together initially, when we had first met, you had challenged me to do this. And I think I had done it before a couple times, but not in the same like framework. But I went back and I realized I hated crying. And why did I hate crying? I hated crying because it showed my sensitivity. Why did I think sensitivity was a bad thing? Well, because I was the youngest of 6 kids in a neighborhood. I grew up in a great neighborhood where there was like 4 kids in my house because my 2 older siblings weren't living there, but 4 kids in my house, 9 next door, 2 across the street, and like 5 plus up the road, and we would all just play in the neighborhood. So great neighborhood, but I was on the younger end of that. And so I was often called a baby. Yeah. Not only was I the baby of the family, but I was often just like called a baby. So anytime I cried, that meant that I was a baby, and I associated like weakness with that and all this stuff. And I had to get to a point of realizing like crying is such a gift and sensitivity is such a gift, and I don't need to numb myself. But I went through middle school, high school, college, like young adult years of like hating crying because I thought it was this like weakness, but it's because I was told I was a baby as a kid,
right,
but right. That goes into my favorite chapter takeaway of the book. And I think that this is one of my favorite chapter takeaways because I'd already practiced it before even meeting you, because I was challenged by like someone else in my life, but I realized like, so chapter 20 is the gratitude chapter, and the chapter takeaway is to be grateful and everything. And so the gift of gratitude is unreal. So in this example that I shared about being called a baby, I had to become grateful for my siblings again and for my neighborhood. But what I love most about this chapter takeaway is not only is it about becoming grateful and being grateful, it's also about forgiving. Mm-hmm. And so not only do I have to be grateful for my siblings now, I also have to forgive them for what they did. And I think that it's funny, but I look at other situations in my life and my friends' lives, and I have a friend who, when he was in high school, his mom passed away from cancer. So he grew super angry. He was mad at a lot of people and things, and mad at God for sure, and stuff. And it took him a few years, but he ended up getting to this place where not only did he, accept that his mom had passed, but he said, I'm grateful for my mom passing away, because my mom passing away allowed me to forgive all these areas of my life and become closer to God. And if I didn't have my mom pass away, I wouldn't have been able to forgive. And so I'm actually grateful that this happened. And people listening who, struggle with death or have some sort of suffering that just they like can't even grasp being grateful for it, like my friend, like that's the goal. That is the goal for suffering, is that you can someday in your life look at it, you can forgive the things around it, and that you can be grateful for the suffering. Because if we allow the suffering to not weigh us down, but instead help form us into the better versions of ourselves, like that, you deserve to, like that situation, that suffering deserves to be forgiven, but also grateful, like having gratitude towards it. And I know it's not easy. I know that I'm sure I'll face difficulties in my future life that I'm not going to be grateful for right away by any means. And maybe I'll be like, I'm grateful for it, but really in my heart I'm not. But like, hopefully I can get to a point where I become grateful for it. But whenever, you're going back in your life looking at these different challenges, maybe you're reading the book, going through the framework, or you pick up the book again and you flip open to the gratitude chapter, like allow yourself to find a posture of gratitude and forgiveness for those circumstances. And so I love that chapter, and I love that it's towards the end of the book, because it like makes, like as you're going through the book you get hungry and hungry for the next chapter takeaway. And that one's a hard one, being grateful for challenges, forgiving situations and people, forgiving yourself, like that is hard stuff, but it's simple. It's a simple thing, it's a simple concept, but it's still hard.
Yeah, so many important things in there. And first, I want to give a shout out to the younger siblings, because I'm also the baby of the family. We're both the babies of our respective families. And most of my friends growing up were the younger siblings. But I want to give a bigger shout out to the older siblings. Being the younger sibling is hard. And honestly, like crying is sometimes the only way that you get out of taking the beat downs from your older siblings. I actually had one friend that he learned that. And he also learned that if they're in a separate room from their parents, he could jump off the couch, smack the ground, and just go, oh, and then his older brother would get in trouble because they just assumed that his older brother was beating him up. So he learned that trick, and he'd buy himself a couple days of protection because he'd be grounded. But then on day 3, he was getting whooped again. But then his brother's grounded again. So he found this system to be able to be the aggravating little brother, take a whooping, but not take a bunch of whoopings through the week. So being the younger sibling is tough. And I think the tough part is like, you always just want to be with your older siblings. Like they're so cool. They have like cool friends. They're doing cool things. Like you just want to be with them. Like you don't really even care to like talk or like have a conversation. Like you just want to be there with them. And I give a huge shout out to my brother because he always allowed that to happen. He always let me be part of it. And I took whoopings from him, from his friends. We grew up in the sock'em, or what do you call them? Sock'em boppers? Like the big boxing gloves that blow up on your fist.
Yeah.
And the thought is that because it's air filled and your fists are in there, it doesn't hurt when you get punched. I got teed off on a few times from some of his friends, and it hurt. Like it'll knock you out and give you some bumps and bruises. But how important it was to have him and still have him in my life, because I was able to then excel in sports. I was able to have a lot of receiving yards. I was able to make some really hard tackles and get the Hammer Award. Basketball I played well in. And everyone was like, oh man, does your brother get jealous or envious? And no, like, he helped make me. And when older siblings take that pride, it's so special. And now, like, to this day, I have such an example for myself of continuing to fight, because you want to hang out with the cool kids. So you're willing to take the punches. You're willing to face the adversity. You're willing to take the suffering because it's for a greater purpose. And as a 10-year-old, that purpose is a lot different than your purpose as a 31, almost 32-year-old. But it's such a great lesson. And for the older sibling to take pride in that, of like, no, I'm taking you under my wing. I'm going to be tough on you, and I'm going to show you how to keep fighting. Like, I remember playing basketball with my brother and him holding me down, because it was full contact basketball. there was no dribbling. It was full contact. And my brother was just beating me up, and he was just laying on me and holding me down. And he just goes, do you want this to end? And I said, never. Like, keep coming at me. And I remember him just going, are you kidding me? Like, what am I creating here? But I never would have had that had he been soft on me. And not saying that like you need to like wrestle, but you need to push each other. And he pushed me. And then once I got to that next level, he checked in. In the heat of a moment of me trying to tackle him down the hill and throw the basketball at his face, he paused and said, do you want this to stop? And I said, no, I want this to keep going. I don't know why, and he's like, okay, fine, then we'll keep going. And it's built me into that mentality of like, no, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep fighting. So I have the example of that from my brother, from my dad, from my mom, to you have to keep fighting. You have to keep making steps forward. When you don't feel like taking that step, you have to just take that one extra step, that one little step. So shout out to all the older siblings in the room, because they really do take on a like third parent role. You know, like you have your mom, dad, maybe step parents involved, but the older sibling is really, they know more. You know, you have more conversations, more challenging conversations in the most cases with your siblings than you would with your parents. Like, you need advice, I'm going to my older brother. If I need some other advice, I'll go to my mom or dad. But it was really like those moments, and that's got to be hard because the older sibling doesn't really know.
Right.
Like, they're going off of their experiences and what they know at that point, but it's difficult to have that responsibility. So I guess what I'm trying to say is shout out to the older siblings for making us cry.
Yeah. Anything else you want to comment?
Nope.
Nothing. Okay. I'm just laughing at all of our siblings. They'd be so encouraged.
Yeah.
Like, I'm thinking of my sister listening, and she'd be like, yeah, I was the one that made you cry.
Yeah. Remember that headlock?
Yeah. Oh, what a joy older siblings can be. Well, Kristen, thank you for that great question. Listener, if you haven't listened to the book, or if you haven't read the book yet, we recommend that you do. Obviously, we love the book. It's our heart and joy with what we're doing here at Hope Not Nope, but it's also just a gift to be able to spread it to more and more people, and for them to take the chapter takeaways and, like you say, go back to them in times of need and in times of challenges. And so Kristen, thank you so much for that question, and Randy and Lena, thank you as well. This was a great episode, and I'm very grateful that we were able to do that. If you have any questions, head over to our website, hopenotnope.org, where you can ask a question. Or if you found us on Instagram or on social media, feel free to DM us, and we can put your question in from social media as well. But we'd love to be able to answer your questions on future podcasts. Again, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe for future content.
I don't want to leave anyone out. We gave a shout out to the younger siblings. We gave a shout out to the older siblings. Shout out to the middle child.
Yes.
didn't even think of what they go through.
Yeah.
Of being on both sides
of
the older and younger sibling.
You just have two in your house, so it's just the older and the younger. Or
right.
My middle siblings, they're funny.
Yeah. So shout out to the middle sibling for taking both of the whoopings from the older child and dealing with the youngest sibling and trying to find balance between those two, because I don't know how you do it. So shout out to the middle child as well. Have a great week. And remember, every day is just not an opportunity to be hopeful. It's an opportunity to become hope.